I want you to think of the term being free. In fact, just think of the word freedom. I think that's probably a lot easier. Freedom can come in many different shapes and sounds. Of course, freedom could take the shape of, say, the breeze swiftly passing by and caressing you on its own little journey, uninterrupted, unstoppable. It can also take the shape of, say, well, sound, as well as like music or traffic or a voice. As soon as these sounds escape their containers, there's no going back. It's out in the open now, ready to simply drift off and do as it pleases with its future of being released into the world that we inhabit. Speaking of sound, however, freedom, more fittingly in this case, can take the form of waves. The ocean, specifically its dark blue abyss, combined with its loud crashes and ever-flowing nature. It shows us what freedom truly is, simply flowing with time. The water always finds a way to simply, well, be free. I hate the ocean. I mean, don't get me wrong, of course, it does look beautiful. I think, you know, when I'm a safe distance from the bloody thing, it looks and sounds incredible. And I've always had a very large amount of respect for people that can just throw themselves at the sea, quite literally delving into the unknown. I mean, shit, if that doesn't sound intimidating, think about this. As the planet is essentially made of water and the sea itself, we've only explored around 5% of it. That's fucking horrifying, right? And well, yes, I know, this so far has just seemed like me rambling on about my greatest fears. That isn't what we're doing in the video. Although, don't get me wrong, the one thing I absolutely despise is centipedes. Jesus. No, I'm actually here to talk to you about a movie I watched this afternoon as I'm writing this script. That movie being Studio 4C's Children of the Sea, or Kaiju no Kodomo, based on the beautiful manga of the same name by author and illustrator Daisuke Igarashi. Children of the Sea is a story set in modern day, and it focuses on a girl by the name of Ruka as we see her feeling outcasted both by her mother and her classmates at the beginning of the film. She appears to be a very extroverted young lady with an eye for excitement, and as summer begins, she decides to spend more time with her dad at the aquarium at which he works. It's then she meets a boy named Umi and later his brother Sora, who seem to have an incredible connection with the sea and the life that floods through it. And beyond that, I have no clue what on earth this movie is about. I'm joking, of course, well, somewhat that is. However, this isn't exactly the easiest of movies to wrap your head around. If it was, where would the fun in that be? As I got myself comfy and turned on the movie just expecting something a little wholesome and all-round gorgeous looking, I was right, but also kind of wrong in some areas. Not only do I think Children of the Sea is mostly about the gift of freedom, like I mentioned somewhat already, and what we could deem in the world to really be the purest form of that, I actually think that one of the film's main showcases is the gift of life, new life specifically, that being showcased in the form of birth. From multiple scenes in the film hinting at the song of life being sung by whales, to the birth of tiny little galaxies being spread into the ocean near the end of the film, all the way up until the film's end credits scene where it shows you Ruka's mother giving birth and for Ruka herself to be there to cut the umbilical cord, literally shoving the theme right in your face there. The gift of life is something that is, well, a little underappreciated, I'd say, in our day-to-day experiences. Of course, with life, we wouldn't be here, that's obvious. However, the gift of life is something that is definitely questioned throughout the film, and questioned in such a beautiful way too, I might add, both visually and rather loudly by the incredible sound design and a soundtrack by the forever wonderful Joe Hisaishi, which never fails to leave me speechless with each listen. Joe Hisaishi, of course, working on some of my other favourite anime films such as Spirited Away and Howl's Moving Castle. The movie's main focus is the Song of Life, I suppose you could call it, in which the tune in question is emitted from a whale in the deepest depths of the ocean. The concept of life is one thing that's been questioned throughout time, and is one that, if you ask me, will be continued to be questioned till the end of time. The questions we have pertaining to the subject range from all different minds and beliefs of the people who inhabit the earth, of course. These thoughts can range from a scientific aspect to a mythological one, all the way to religious beliefs as well. People can choose to believe what they want to believe. I have no quarrel with that whatsoever. However, someone did have a quarrel with such a mindset. That person being Thales of Miletus. Thales was a Greek mathematician, astronomer, and philosopher who approached the concept of life and its creation with a demythologized sense of belief. That's essentially just a fancy word for taking the scientific route of things. Of course, there has been a lot of people throughout time with this mindset, and of course, some of you watching this video may have it as well. Most popularly, Empedocles, another philosopher after Thales' time, suggested that the Earth was formed due to four main elements: air, water, fire, and earth. I'm sure you're all very familiar with that concept, but I'd like to focus more so on Thales here and his mindset towards creation. Nourishment, of all things, is moist. Even the hot is created by the wet and lives by it. End quote. Thales essentially believed that the sky, the earth, and the heat, and every life form between was essentially formed through the evolution of water throughout time. Which, of course, does seem a bit weird on surface level, right? But well, think about it. Nowadays, we see water as a form of life, or the staple mark of the existence of life itself. Hell, people went crazy when NASA found water on Mars. Do you remember that? We humans are formed of 70% water. We need water to drink. We need water to live. Animals and plants need it too. It would only be natural to theorize that, well, water is the center of life, therefore being used for the creation of life, right? This theory was something very unheard of in the time of Thales, the man himself being frowned upon as one of the few first people to openly talk about his disbelief of the gods, and prompted much controversy as he gained popularity. And of course, with a belief like that recorded in history, it would of course span some followers. Xenophanes of Colophon, another Greek philosopher, which came a good amount of time after Thales and follower of the I'll just call it the water principle theory. That sounds cool, right? Xenophanes also stated, "The Great Sea is the parent. The Great Sea is the source of water and wind. It is the parent of the clouds, the winds, and the rivers." End quote. The most interesting correlation here is that Dede, a proclaimed shepherd of the sea, shared a quote similar to that of Xenophanes in the movie, stating that the sea is the mother. And now the song continues. The people are her bosom, heaven is the playground, and now it begins. End quote. The film handles the execution of projecting this theory rather well, if you ask me at least. I know I'm treading on somewhat thin grounds here, seeing as I'm taking people's beliefs into account, but I really do think, as a theory anyway, the movie's projection of it is done in such an interesting and visually appealing way. It is a theory that, well, makes sense, yes, but I can understand if some of you can't or don't want to wrap your head around it. As someone who's rather open to any sort of concept myself, whether that be both scientific or, say, religious, I'm open to learning and listening about any concept. So to be introduced to a theory with such an insanely captivating story as given to us by Children of the Sea was beyond a treat for me, to say the very least, right now. However, Thales, obviously being a philosopher, also was known for studying in the field of metaphysics. Metaphysics is the branch of philosophy that studies the first principles of being, identity and change, space and time, causality, necessity, and possibility. Space and time, of course, being the main focus here, as the film's ending sequence can now be kind of unravelled, which was, by the way, one of the most beautifully animated scenes I think I've ever saw in my life. It shows us just how much of an inspiration Thales and his studies were to the story. Not only that, author Daisuke Igarashi also had another main point of inspiration for his story, that being Arthur C. Clarke's insanely popular story of greed, evolution, and control, 2001. A Space Odyssey. From the similarities and visual effects shown in the film directed by Stanley Kubrick, as David, the main character of the film, began his warp in the movie, and as Ruka began her reformation in the galaxy, even to the inclusion of newborn children in their most heated, rather eerie moments. The references and similarities are there, with, of course, the theme itself being born anew. The demythologized references during the movie overall do make a lot of sense, considering that knowledge about how important the water is both in our daily life and in the long term of the evolutionary journey of life on Earth is so vast. Research upon research suggests that, well, the first of our life forms can even be dated from coming from the sea itself. The first ever recorded movement of a seahorse, just as a blind example, can be dated back to near enough 13 million years ago. However, their general existence can probably be looked back as far as the Cretaceous era, which represents one of the 5 eras and the geological epochs that the Earth has passed through. From the tiniest of creatures such as a simple thing like, say, bacteria, all the way to the largest, smartest creatures like dolphins or whales, the Earth has always housed life in the depths of its blood. That blood being, of course, a metaphor for the water and the sea. Children of the Sea seems to take a rather subtly literal title now, I suppose, seeing as the origin of the world is theorised to have began from the water, the children of the earth being, well, the creatures that inhabit its waters. Well, that and the fact it's a song by Black Sabbath. That's cool, I guess. Coincidentally enough though, music, songs and sound in the movie serve as a very key part to its plot. Of course, I'm talking about something as unsettling as a whale song, the movie dubbing it the Song of Life or the Birth Song. This is used in the movie as somewhat of an alarm, so to speak, like a rally call to gather for, again as the movie dubs it, the Birth Festival. No matter their general depiction in media, whales have always been seen to carry some form of stoic, grand feel no matter what screen they're on or what form of media they're portrayed in. From myths to movies to documentaries, all the way to video games or through religious miracles, and even in classic literature like Moby Dick, the most popular work including The Existence of Whales written by the American author Herman Melville. Whales in the movie are painted to be the mothers of the sea. Their presence, of course, just like any presence they have in the media, said to be one of a high precedence. Our mother of the sea that was teased throughout the movie seeming to be identified as a humpback whale. The most interesting and most beautiful part of the whale is its white underbelly, with the shape of a female in that white highlight. The colour white for the whale, at least corresponding to the movie, represents a symbol of the science behind said colours, especially the white if we follow the rule of RGB, which consists of mainly 3 main colours, red, blue and green. Its hypnotic luminance and intimidating presence can bring us to one of the film's main themes, finding faith. Finding faith in higher forces and chasing the ever-growing feeling of certainty as you delve deep into the world of uncertainty. From the beginning of the film, Ruka seemed to be a girl full of confidence. Her spark for a summer filled with adventure and, of course, as I assume you've seen the film, her journey for the taste of discovery clearly turns into something eerie and a little sour through the discovery of the meteors, or the will-o'-the-wisps as Umi and Sora calls them, to the very strange hypnotic uncovering of the enchanting whale song. The Humpback's biggest feature, of course, is its song, which is quite different from any other types of whales. Its tune can be recorded to last from as little to 30 minutes all the way as incredibly long as 20 hours of repeated sessions. That's insane, I know. The songs have a complex hierarchical structure. The basic unit of a song, which lasts for a few seconds, is a single vocalization with a middle row, which varies from 10 to 20 kHz. The whales also have an important dimension in the story of the film, being used to represent the incubating environment for a conduit for a new life or birth, just like a mother's womb, and this is a sign of the similarity between both humankind and whales for being the smartest mammals on Earth. Through the whale, we're given our gateway into the final act of the film, which focuses very heavily on the space and time side of things, like we mentioned earlier very briefly. The film focuses largely on things like metaphysics and the idea that we are made up of the same materials that the universe and the stars are made of, coincidentally enough being one of the main studies of Thales, much like how Thales suggested that everything we know of, live and breathe, was created by the Aqua. But if that was the case for everything on Earth, then well, what created the Aqua? A question that Children of the Sea also takes a crack at through the Panspermia theory. Panspermia is the hypothesis that life exists throughout the universe, distributed by space dust, meteorites, asteroids, comets and planets, as well as by things like spacecrafts carrying unintended contamination by microorganisms. It is a theory that assumes the connection of celestial bodies, including the meteorites in the anime specifically, and the emergence of life on Earth that assumes the emergence of life on the planet after a giant meteor collided with our planet. In the film, meteorites have a very large symbolic and literal presence. They are used to embody the essence of creation and to show us a beautiful visual representation of what the studio and the author thinks the process of the planet's creation may have looked like, while I said earlier, also paying homage to A Space Odyssey and its visual direction. The meteorites have a very alluring and lustful and a pretty blatant sexual presence in the film too. In the scene I'm describing to you now, there is a symbolic sign of sexual physiological process where we see a lone surviving meteor out of the barrage we initially see make it to a core and manage to slip and wiggle its way in to cause a new developmental process in that said core, a comparison we can make to, well, the creation of life from a human viewpoint, such as how a lone surviving sperm cell travels through the recipient to make it to the egg, so that the creation process can start. Look, I know, you came here for an anime movie, not a sex ed class. So, much like the mind-blowing visual representation, it tells us that, well, everyone carries a mini-universe inside of them. I know that does sound a little odd, and don't go trying to look for it. The universe is made up of 85% of dark matter, the secret of our bodies and what is considered dark matter. Much like the inside of our bodies, we cannot inherently see dark matter with just an average glance. For the sake of talking, they both mirror the exact same limited knowledge that the universe offers us. The human body, however, was just something that, well, was a lot easier to test on than space was. What initiated such a wild chain of events is what was briefly went over as I was discussing the whale song. Of course, I'm talking about the Festival of Birth. Ceremonies like these are nothing new in the realm of a thing like anime or manga or just Japanese culture in general. It ties very tightly with the identity of said culture and implicitly differs from one region to another. Due to the geographical diversity of Japan, as it consists of archipelagos, which is a group of different islands, each island is characterized by its own rituals and celebrations and feasts with various goals. When it comes to Children of the Sea, however, the film takes on a bit more of a cosmic role in its depiction as it combines all the concepts we've previously discussed so far, like the water principle, whales, metaphysics, meteors, and demythologized beliefs, grabbing all of humankind and their memories and their interactions within to create the celebration in the film known as the Festival of Birth, where said celebration is described by Dende already as I referred to it previously, or comparing it to the words of Xenophanes. In that moment, the moment of birth, that is. The sea and the whale are the parents responsible for the metaphorical childbirth, and the meteorites are the sperm which is responsible for that life that Ruka had been carrying in her stomach throughout the latter half of the film, that life being represented through the wisp that Sora had fed Ruka in the scene in which they shared a surprise kiss on the beach. Meteorites can be then used to translate Ruka's memories and experiences into a form and a kind which to be seen by her. Ruka's body is then manipulated into nothing but a shadow of her previous self, a dark, pitch-black, celestial body, which it becomes a literal miniature embodiment of our universe as we know it during the process of the birthing festival in the final segment of the film. Quantum theory and the paradox of the Schrodinger principle are embodied in suspicion during the birth celebration, as many rather scary, intimidating blacked-out eyes appear during the sequence in which we see the birthing festival take full effect, pointing to the symbolism of the inevitability of difficulty and the inevitability of confirming the behaviour and monitoring of the elementary particles in the universe. Due to Schrodinger's principle of suspicion that unnoticed particles do not necessarily exist until we truly start to tune in and fully acknowledge the particles, well, being there, and once we witness seeing it or observing it by ourselves, it confirms that it's already there, including the interpretation of the sight of eyes in that moment, which indicates that the world exists in the moment that you see it, and only when you see it. The events of this film happens, nevertheless, under a cover of a magical metaphysical aura, and many things get a metaphysical or intuitive range. Communication that takes place on a non-physical or imperceptible range, cosmic communication through telepathy or convergent wavelength, or other things that may be a symbolic sign of the method of how whales are communicating through it, not by language, but rather by a method that the language cannot reach. It is perhaps one of the most important messages that the film wanted to broadcast to the viewer. How is life created? How was the universe born? Where do we come from? And most interestingly, a question that remains unanswered, where do we go? Since the most important things like these belong to areas beyond the limits of humanity's verbalization, we cannot speak them into words. However, there is no choice but to simply experience it as it is. Both the manga series and film perfectly manage to capture the mystery of life, and have you manage to feel like you are in a mystery. Children of the Sea doesn't just propose a theme or an ideal or a moral. The film just proposes a question and leaves it to you, the audience, to come up with their own answer and said question through the visual representation of a large handful of demythologized proposals, philosophical discoveries, and overall well-discussed theories that have spanned throughout the history of time. Its almost unsettling tone of chasing after what is originally conceived to be a whimsical adventure can easily be stopped and put on view for the viewer to showcase. Well, how much information are you really comfortable in knowing before wishing you could go back and live in the world of anonymity? Or well, are you even prepared to be able to take that first step in finding out all this information? The film left me feeling somewhat confused, really. Of course, yes, because the movie is very confusing, but also, well, I suppose I didn't really know how to feel on anything. It was a movie that was so beautifully twisted in how it treats its characters and how it treats human life as a whole, really, and I had genuinely cared to just learn, to progress, to uncover the secrets of the earth and to just move forward. But in that, it also teaches us that there are ultimately no way around such a necessity. We can fear it, dread it, and run from it however we could possibly see it fit. But in the end, the progression of nature, the progression of life, and the progression of the stars and beyond won't stop in our favour. It's a routine, it's a ceremony, it's, well, the rules of time, and time is most certainly a cruel mistress. I don't think by any manner of means this movie was trying to make you feel the unknown. However, I do believe that there was a sense of, well, trying to push the message of knowing your limits, while at the very same time also encouraging the audience to journey out to find those limits. And the more and more I'll continue on about this movie, the more and more I'll start to confuse both you and me. However, as confusing and sort of fresh, I suppose you could say, the movie seems to be, it doesn't take away from the fact that this is one of the best, most intriguing experiences I've ever had with not just an anime film, but cinema as a whole. It had some of the best, most beautiful eye-catching direction I've ever seen in an animated film that stretched just under a 2-hour runtime. It's more than interesting concept for a story, stellar animation, and amazing soundtrack that makes up for a very pleasantly uncomfortable experience. Is something I don't think I could ever see being topped for me personally when it comes to anime films. I know, it's a big stone I'm stepping on there, but I do honestly believe that. As much as I've covered and explained today, I do enjoy viewing the film as an ever-unfolding mystery that keeps getting more and more interesting with every watch, much like the question of life and existence itself. We will never truly know what happened or what started it all, and with Children of the Sea and almost, well, any anime or manga really, we'll never truly know what's going on in an author or writer's head. The film still has its questions to answer, it still has its themes that remain unfound, and still has its details that are a new piece to pick up on with every watch. I've done my best and enjoyed picking this film apart, and now it's your turn. Life is a mystery, so just go and find something. I'll be right here for when you find it. Thank you for watching.